Two quick things. First, Meta has censored me and removed my Facebook group. If you're not already in my email community, please be sure to download one of the free gifts that you see here in the show notes and join my email community. Next, this episode you're about to hear is an encore presentation from my Psychedelic, Sacred Medicines, and Soul's Purpose Summit. It's with one of the most renowned thought leaders out there, and I thought you would enjoy it. Thank you for being here. I'm so honored to have Charles Eisenstein here with us today, the great thought leader, author, and now in politics. I'm so excited to have you here. Hi, Charles.
Yeah, thanks, Beth. I'm really happy to be here.
So Charles is a teacher, public speaker, and author who examines the unspoken narratives that direct our society and our lives. His work covers a wide range of topics, including the history of human civilization, consciousness, economics, spirituality, interdependence, ecology, and how myth and story influence culture. He is the author of The More Beautiful World Our Hearts Know Is Possible, Sacred Economics, and The Ascent of Humanity. His latest book, The Coronation, was released in the summer of 2022. And you can check out his gift link. It is the Sanity Project, which I can say I'm a part of. It is by donation, whether it's free or suggested, but please join in. It's a really amazing community forum, and Charles is active in there. And it's really great to be part of the Sanity Project. So check out his links there. Charles, I've interviewed you a few times, so I'm not going to go into your whole story, and we're going to try to keep this succinct. I want to know, what's really alive for you right now? This world that we're in, we are recording this in the end of August, 2023. And, we've just gone through wildfires. There's a presidential campaign coming up in the U.S. What's most alive for you right now in the collective that you're feeling?
Maybe I could say that, and I think maybe you and other people have also experienced this, that what is alive is that we are coming more alive. Everything is intensifying, and we're entering, I like to say, the rehearsal is over. That all of the practices that we've been doing for a long time, all of the workshops, all of the preparation is now relevant to, and it's time to apply all of that. It's showtime, and the fires, the economic situation, the mounting totalitarianism, like all of this kind of stuff converging at the same time. Not only the problems and the darkness, but also the consciousness that can be part of the solution. These are not just spiritual insights or psychedelic insights that you have, and then you go back to humdrum, grim reality. These experiences that, I'll talk about psychedelics because I think that's kind of what we're about here. These insights that we've had, their time has come. They're not just metaphysical ideas, especially the ones that speak to our agency and power as creative beings, not separate from creation, not individual separate selves who can only have a minuscule impact on the world. If that is all we are, then the situation is indeed hopeless. Because if it's a contest of force versus force, then, how much force do you and I have compared to the, human trafficking elites, the financial cartels, the military-industrial complex, and so forth? Not very much. If the world works the way that they think it does, then there is no hope. But come on, haven't we had enough experiences that show us that the world does not work the way that they think it does, and that the way that we thought it did. We've had these experiences, and now we got to put them into action. That's what I mean by the rehearsal is over. We have to actually live from what we have been shown. And we do that in part by having conversations like this one, that we remind each other in the non-psychedelic consciousness, if there is such a thing. We remind each other of what we have seen, of, for example, the fact that there are intelligences beyond the human that we can tap into to create change that the ordinary mind of linear cause and effect could not comprehend. We have to actually live in that. And if you don't live in that, if you create a division between psychedelic reality and political reality, the result will be despair. So if you are feeling despair when you read the news, you got to look inside. What information are you excluding to preserve the story of despair, the story of it's hopeless? You got to exclude an awful lot of information to stay in that story. So I'm happy to be in this dialogue with you to help remind me also. Even when I speak about it, I remind myself.
Yeah, thank you so much for bringing up the other part that's not spoken about enough. Because I was telling Charles before we came on camera, I've done a lot of the interviews for the summit, and there's definitely a different energy, even compared to when I was doing it in 2020. Back then there was, it was kind of scary and uncertain, but there was a lot more hope. And this year has definitely been a little more of this kind of doomsday vibe. And I feel that, there's a lot of people that have just gotten so burnt out, like working at their job, kind of slaving away, trying to make ends meet, then feeling like, okay, maybe I do see that there's certain forces in control that don't serve humanity or the earth. And what can I do about it? I hear this a lot. There's a lot of this, like people want to help and make a difference, but then they feel helpless. It's like, okay, in comparison to, the Jeff Bezos of the world with multi-billions of dollars, or I don't know, trillions at this point. So what can like the average person do? And especially someone who's maybe just starting to work with psychedelics, and maybe they're just starting to realize the interconnectedness of all.
Yeah, it's not really for me to tell you what to do. That would assume that I know your situation better than you do. That would be pretty arrogant, insulting even. But what I can say is that as your field of information broadens, as you become aware of things that you were not aware of before, your understanding of what to do changes as well. And that understanding comes not only from your intellectual knowledge about the state of the world, but also from your connection to your feelings, which are a much more reliable guide toward what to do. It's what you care about, what gets under your skin, what moves your heart, what opens up your love. That's what to do. The mind of separation, the mind of calculating return on investment, does not know what to do. Because in fact, a lot of the most important things that need to be done today are things that are seemingly inconsequential in the story that we grew up in. For example, I'm thinking of which friend it is who's just, I have a few friends in this situation, actually. But I'll just name one. I won't name him, actually. He's a very, very wealthy friend. He runs $1 billion company. He's and not just in business, he's doing all kinds of big things. But you know what he does? Every day, he cooks breakfast for his grandfather and drives to the nursing home to deliver it to him. of all the things that he could do that have high leverage and high impact, and could I mean, he's starting a media company, a music company, all this kind of stuff, conscious music. Like, of all the things that he could do, he's spending an hour of his day every day visiting his 91-year-old grandfather. It's hard to in the worldview that I grew up in, what good is that going to do? The guy's going to die anyway. Sure, he'll feel happier. He won't be lonely and abandoned in this nursing home. But come on, as far as practicality, you should be spending time with young people, right? He should be reaching the masses, not just one man who's going to die anyway in a nursing home. But this more, what I said is a more reliable navigational system. It listens to something else. That's what we have to listen to. And in order to listen to that, we have to enter into a different story of change, a different theory of change, a different story of causality. And that is one of the insights that psychedelics can reveal to us, that our idea of what is important and what isn't important is mistaken.
I'm constantly reminding clients to be centered around what's most important. And I because I had to go through this myself, I still do. It's like, I find myself where it's like, oh, I should be working right now because there's so much on the to-do list. But then, I have beehives and I have to go tend to them, and not have to, but like want to, like technically I could just let them be and maybe they'll survive. But, and when I'm out there, I really spend this conscious time, like feeling that feeling of like, okay, well, what is really important right now? Like being connected to nature and being like my true self, or going and making sure I'm productive, and like, and is it all gonna fall apart if I don't do that thing that's due today? But that struggle is so real for so many people, like the programming of, I don't have time. I'm going through this right now with my own brother. Like, oh, I get paid by the hour and I can't go visit mom, even though, just in the hospital. Like, he's like, oh, I can visit her in October. You know what I mean? And it's been interesting to watch, like, how do we deprogram ourselves from these beliefs in that system? Like the system you said, like, this is how you even had this mindset of like, oh, well, if that's not producing a result, or if that's not helping, or if this doesn't actually matter in the larger scale. How and you just mentioned psychedelics can help with this. For those of the listeners that are maybe just getting into psychedelic medicine, and maybe they're, they heard it helps their depression, do you have any advice for how they can actually work with these psychedelics to maybe deprogram that and start to reprogram themselves to know what's truly important, to actually, follow that kind of deeper place of living with their soul?
Yeah. So there's a few things here. I'm just going down level after level after level here. One of my favorite phrases that I don't know if I'm sure other people have thought of it before, but it came to me when I was writing my first book, which was kind of my practice book, called The Yoga of Eating. The illness seeks the medicine. We instinctively recognize psychedelic drugs as medicines. They are medicines because of the illness that is part of our of modern society, of who we are as social beings today. In other words, it is the modern human being, as narrated by the mythology that we live in, is very, very far from the true human being. It is a struggle. It is an endeavor. It is hard to be fully, really authentically human in this society. We need help to do that. On some level, we have purposefully immersed ourselves in this reality in order to grow the soul in the ways that can only happen through challenge. It is hard to be generous. It is hard to act from love. It's like swimming against a current here. So like your brother is like, it's hard. You can't stand in judgment and say, oh, well, you shouldn't, you should leave your job or you should make these sacrifices. Like that's the whole point, is that we're put in situations where you have to make a sacrifice, where it's hard to enact the revelations that you might get on psychedelics. And that's the whole point of it. And when we do that hard thing, when many of us do that hard thing, then we transform the entire circumstances and we become medicines for the world. The medicine that we receive from psychedelics, we carry forth. Those medicines turn us into medicine. As for how to do that, I've been in this world back into the 90s. I was on the first internet listserv on psychedelics. And that was one of the questions, like meta programming, when you're in the psychedelic space, how do you program yourself to carry this out or to remember? And I don't know. And then that morphed over. This is in the 90s. And then it became about integration. And I think what we're converging upon is that integration has to happen through community. We have to collectively hold a different story. It's not something that you can do through your own effort. So I would say how to do that, it's again, to have these kind of conversations. That's part of how to do it. To normalize what we see clearly in the psychedelic space, but which seems crazy in consensus reality. So we're doing it right now. And how that plays out, what choice points that brings into your life, and what you choose in that moment, that is unique to you. But maybe the more that each person does that and makes a choice coming from a different understanding, the more we create a field and the more we normalize that kind of choice.
Wow, beautiful. I love that. You speak about creating this different story, and I had a conversation just last week that it's come up a few times around this idea that there is actually something larger at play here, right? Like, whatever people want to call it, there's a higher force in charge of this story that we're in, right? As a collective, even the Earth story itself. And there's a part of me that, when I get into existential angst, which is fairly often and usually in the middle of the night, it's like, oh, okay, wait, I have to remember that there's something larger at play here. And it just is, and that's kind of the surrender to what is. But then there's this whole like this whole feeling of like, what's my contribution? Why am I incarnated here? What am I doing to help? Like that I want to help feeling that a lot of people have. Mm-hmm. And I know you've talked about this before, of this awareness that there is something else, there's way beyond our comprehension, right? Like we don't know, other beings, other planets, forces. And how do you come to terms with that notion that maybe everything that we are going through is just, it's going to happen regardless? And then also this idea of, this conversation I had last week was around, are we actually collectively manifesting this by talking about, the doomsday more and more? Like years ago, I kept hearing like the crash, things are crashing, the Kali Yuga. And it's like, Are we actually just making this happen, or is it happening and then we're just talking about it? Like, and
Yeah.
then kind of that like inner, because there's this part of me, and I've heard other people, it's like, oh, well, if this is just going to happen anyways, then like, why do we even care?
It's not just going to happen anyway. The crash is not going to save us. It provides us a choice point. And when every time there's a crisis, we can choose whether we want to continue that path or take a new path. Usually in life, we don't really have the choices that we think we would like to have. When you're speeding down the superhighway of life, there is not always an exit ramp. But the moments of crisis, of emergency, of breakdown, that in this metaphor, that is when there's a crossroads, that when there's an exit ramp. And in those moments, you have a choice that is otherwise not available. Or you could say that a choice becomes conscious that had been automatic. There has to be a break of some sort before we wake up and have the opportunity to make a different choice, but it's not automatic. I think about this a lot. I wrote a book on environment called Climate: A New Story that goes into this a lot. That the idea that, well, now we're going to have to change because it's just so bad now. I'm like, no. If we were going to change because it was so bad, we would have already changed, because it has been getting worse and worse and worse. How many fish and whales and frogs and amphibians and bats and bees and trees have to die before we say, oh, it's just too bad now, we have to change? No, we never have to change. We could end up in what I call the concrete world, where all of the food is grown in hydroponics and fermentation vats and synthetically, and we live in bubbles and engineer the environment, and the whole world is one giant strip mine and waste dump. You don't think we could do that? Well, we're 90% of the way there. Or maybe exaggerating a little bit, but that's not going to stop us. We are not going to be stopped. We have to make a choice. And the same thing. So these despair narrative, these doomsday narratives, they are a kind of a poison. They are self-fulfilling prophecies, because as the Bible saying goes, by their fruits ye shall know them. What is the impact? What is the effect on you? Who do you become when you are possessed by these narratives? When you possess them and they possess you, who do you become? Do you become more capacious? Do you become more active? Do you become more energetic? Do you feel better? Or do you become more passive? Do you become depressed? What if you chose your beliefs based on that? But I'll say one more thing. I think that it's not so much that these narratives cause us to feel depression and passivity and paralysis and despair. They are the exterior layer of a state of being rooted in trauma that we are healing from. They make visible some of the wounds that we carry. So if you are attracted to doomsday narratives, you could say, well, what hurts here? What is in need of healing? What medicine do I need? So in a way, these narratives are symptoms. They're much more symptoms than they are causes. But we can get trapped in them. We can get trapped in the totality of the state of being plus the intellectual layer of that called the narrative. That is a whole a whole state of being. That state of being, it is itself a being. It has a life cycle. And maybe it's at the end of its life cycle for many of us. And we're ready. We feel impatient with it. We feel frustrated by it. We want to break free of that. We sense that there is a next evolution of the soul that has transcended that. And that desire to break free of it issues a call to the medicines. Because it's not only that the illness seeks the medicine, it's also that the medicine seeks the illness. And these medicines are coming to us according to inscrutable logic that it's not random. Their insertion into consensus reality from their lurking places, in the far reaches of indigenous cultures, or the synchronicities. I mean, like they find ways to enter when they're needed. And it is our sincere desire to heal, our desire to transcend, even in the moment where it seems most impossible, where it seems hopeless. Yet the desire still doesn't die. And there's setback after setback after setback, but we still keep trying. That issues a really powerful call. The medicines hear that call and they hearken to it.
Wow. Yeah. And you mentioned the wounds and the traumas, and it's like, yeah, there's individual traumas, but there's this collective trauma, this collective wound around the wound of separation. It's like, it's a very simple, like the wound of separation, the wound of not feeling safe, not feeling held here on earth. Like, I've done so much work personally around just feeling like I belong here on earth. Like, even though I'm incarnated here, and so many people, I think feel this way, and it's like, even if they don't realize this wound of separation, it's playing out everywhere we see it. And it feels like it keeps getting worse. It's like social media, politics, the world stage, world leaders separate. We could go on and on. And then even in the psychedelic space itself, even in these interviews, it's like, I've had numerous people in these interviews say, well, here is the right way. Here is the only way. This is how it should be done. This is not the way, and it's interesting. There's been a lot of talk around like, well, is there really like a rule around like who's allowed to use this plant medicine, and that person shouldn't be, involved in it because they're a white man from California and not indigenous from the jungles of Peru. And this has come up so much, especially there was this huge conference recently where it's, it's definitely like right there in front of our eyes. What is your feeling on that kind of, that's another narrative, like this is wrong.
I mean, I've come across ayahuasqueros from Peru who have basically been psychopaths. I mean, I know people who have been horribly victimized by practitioners flying the indigenous flag. And there are people who are called to the medicine, who from white suburbia in California. Like, I don't think that we can resort to formulas and shortcuts about how the medicine should be used and by whom, which is not to say that anything goes and that there are no abuses. I tend to not be dogmatic about it. But I think that we have a lot to learn from indigenous practice with these medicines. I listened to an Emerald podcast recently about adornment that I thought had a lot to offer. I think it was from last January. Had a lot to offer the psychedelic space, the psychedelic community. I mean, but it was about how intimate repetition and attention over a long period of time creates a sacred space. You can't do it with something that you buy, but it requires dedication. It requires commitment. It requires patience, and extended attention, rather than, okay, this is going to come and fix me, and treating it as a consumer item to gain experiences that are really cool and fun. That said, I think that our prejudice against fun taps into an anti-life puritanism that also needs to be questioned. Mm-hmm. I've got nothing against recreational use of psychedelics, but these are very, very powerful beings that we need to learn how to engage with humility. Otherwise you can get hurt in very deep ways. And I think that if you come from humility and respect, you will be able to distinguish, you will be able to answer these questions. You will be able, because you will seek out people who are humble, who don't stand in front of the medicine, but who serve the medicine in more than one sense. We have the capacity to recognize such people. And there's a lot of people who do not have that capacity very well developed, who have a lot of programming in overcoming their wolf sense. We are a damaged people. And the return journey will involve a lot of dead ends and detours. But we are on the return journey, and there is a path home. There is a path home. That is the kind of optimism that I know is well-founded and that I hold. It's not that we will automatically reach home. Nothing is going to save us from the outside. The positive ETs, the guardian races, that's not how they do it. But there is a path home. It is not up to powers beyond ourselves whether that path is available to us. We just have to recognize when the path diverges, which one to take. And inevitably, sometimes we will take the wrong path. And then we have to recognize what a dead end looks like, and when to turn around, retrace our steps, revisit a choice, and choose something else, to learn from the wrong turns, so that when the next choice point comes, we know what path to take. But we can do it. The despair is a lie. It comes from a lie that there is no path to a more beautiful world.
So beautiful. Thanks for sharing. Okay, I know you're short on time, so I'm going to ask one last question, if you're able to share about this. So you've been, I'm assuming, because you've said this to your email list and publicly, you are working on the Robert Kennedy 2024 presidential candidacy and election. And I'm curious, are you able to share about future President-elect Kennedy's views on decriminalization of psychedelics for...
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, he's spoken on that publicly, he's... but I remember the first time he said publicly that he was going to, it wasn't just pot, he was going to decriminalize all psychedelics. That's what his position is. And it comes from the experience of one of his children having a powerful healing, in the Amazon with ayahuasca. So it's, still for most politicians, it's politically unmentionable. There's still the lingering influence of the war on drugs and stuff. But, this
old
is,
to me.
yeah. I mean, I remember as a public speaker 15 years ago, it was really like edgy for me to come out of the closet publicly and talk about psychedelics. Like that was, nowadays it's nothing. I mean, it's not a big deal. And that is starting to reach politics too. And there are, I know that there are people in government, there are people in the military who are sitting in with psychedelics. So it's almost at this point an open secret. And this is in fact one of the reasons for optimism. It's that the medicines are penetrating more and more deeply into the power structures.
Yeah, I'm like, I wish I could name names of who I've sat with in ceremonies.
Yeah. Right.
Like,
and then they have the same dilemma that everyone else does, though. They sit in ceremony and then they go back to Congress, or the Joint Chiefs of Staff or wherever they are, the corporate boardroom. And what do I do with this information? How do I integrate this in to, bureaucratic policies? Like what do I do with this? This is the hollowing out. What's happening is that the mythology upon which our ecocidal world devouring culture is based is hollowing out. The story is hollowing out. The structures are all still there on the outside, but no one really believes in them anymore. We're just going through the motions. And that means that when the crisis point hits, we're not going to be attached enough to these structures to repair them and to maintain them and to keep them in place. We'll be feeling almost a sense of relief when they break. That's how the change happens.
Funny, I'm laughing because I said to someone like 2 weeks ago, I was like, why does it feel like we're just pretending? Like we're all just pretending, like you said, like going through the motions. It's like, wait, we all know this is a crock of shit, right? Like on so many levels. So.
Yeah, I had to watch the Republican debate last night, which was quite unpleasant. But I had that feeling. I'm like they're all posturing, and pretending to be exercised about these things, and pretending to. But I'm like, on some level, you realize, don't you, that you are that this is theater, that you're just posturing, and it just rings hollow, and that's one reason why I have devoted so much of my time and energy to advising Robert F. Kennedy Jr. because the guy's authentic, he's not posturing, and like I have my disagreements with him, but I believe that somebody authentic will ultimately do the right thing most of the time. Yeah.
Gotta get him elected. We'll do it. I have so much faith. Anyways, we could do a whole 8-hour podcast on that. Charles, I want to leave you some space to talk about what you have going on yourself for your work and anything you have coming up that you want people to know about, and then also about your Sanity project as well.
Yeah, I'll just maybe say a little bit about the Sanity project. I conceived it as a 6-month program, but I'm probably next year going to make it an ongoing thing. And it's a little bit of what I was talking about before, that the Sanity is a group project to hold a story that is different from the conventional story that surrounds us. You can't really do it by yourself. You end up drifting back in these really unconscious, subtle ways into conformity until the clarity that you had, the insight that you had, maybe it was in a psychedelic journey, or maybe it was in some other experience at a festival or something like that. It starts to seem just like a memory. and you start to question whether it was real and whether the insights that you had are valid. But if you have other people who are echoing them, who are holding them with you, then you can create a new culture. So the Sanity Project is a kind of a sanctuary of a new story, and I offer provocations, inspirations, videos. I make, just like a constant drip to anchor a new story, and then people are there's a forum, there's little groups, and so people hold it together. And I might next year I might make it into kind of like a once a week Sunday kind of thing. I have guests coming to, so it's kind of like, it's a bit like a conventional online program. And it's also like evolving as we do it. But yeah, it's and also, like, especially when I'm involved in the political world, I also need to fully express myself, because the general public, there are things that I really want to say that do not meet the general public, but that I can, but in a more contained environment, I can really like unfold, as in this conversation. So, yeah, thank you for asking.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm in there. I'm a lurker. I read things, I watch things, but it's really cool because there's a sense of community too, where people want to meet up, and I keep picturing having a big gathering in person.
Yeah, we'll do that. Yeah. We've been doing that once a year, but in the predecessor to this project, but I'm gonna probably end up doing it twice a year, or maybe more, because it is, those gatherings are so beautiful.
Charles, I just want to thank you for the work you're doing. It's really so important, and putting your voice out there right now is more important than ever. So thank you for taking the time in between dealing with politics and presidential debates. This audience really appreciates you and your voice and sharing your unique medicine with the world. And this just gives us so much hope, especially during these, uncertain times.
Yeah, thanks, Beth. I enjoyed it as usual.
Thank you so much.